Sign up to The Economist for in-depth curated expert analysis of world events and topics ranging from business and culture to science and technology. You'll get the weekly digital edition, online-only articles, curated newsletters on politics, the markets, science, culture and China, and full access to The Economist Podcast Plus. The Economist is independent journalism for independent thinking. Go to economist.com and get your first month free.
Today on CityCast Houston, it's June 10th, aka 610. So we're celebrating a freeway that has impacted all of our lives as Houstonians. Love it or hate it, the 610 loop. From being stuck in traffic to taking 610 to get to our favorite places in the city, 610 is an important part of our daily experience. So I'm bringing on Danny Perez from TxDOT to celebrate 610 with our favorite memories, upsetting moments, and the future of the loop. It's Monday, June 10th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Danny, what's up, man? Welcome back into CityCast Houston. How are you?
Doing good, Raheel. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. Before we get to this conversation, I want to ask you a question about the loop, okay? Do you prefer inside the loop or outside of the loop?
It depends. There's inside the loop has its benefits. Outside the loop has its benefits as well. I think the convenience of living inside the loop, you have so many different arteries and so many different options to get where you need to go. But of course, to live outside the loop, there are some options there as well. So it just depends on what people's preferences are. But I feel like there's benefits to living inside both. Now we have multiple loops. So we have the 610 loop, obviously, and there's the Beltway, and now we have the Grand Parkway.
Yeah, we are a city of loops for sure. And I'm totally an outside of the loop guy. I love my inside the loopers, but come on, outside of the loop, suburban life, that's what I'm talking about. But I'm also nestled in between the other loops as well. So it's kind of weird. You're right. There's so many loops now.
Right.
Hey, Danny, we see 610 now as this complete loop and a big part of the city. But when was it built and how long did it take?
So initially, discussion started, I want to say around the 1930s and 1940s. For a loop that would go around the city. It wasn't really planned initially as a loop itself. It was just kind of sections. So over the years, there was discussion. Of course, World War II happened, and that definitely put the project a little further into the future than originally intended. But the construction started around the 1950s, and it wrapped up in the early 1970s. So it's been a major corridor for folks that travel in around the Houston area. Also, it's known as Loop 610, but it's technically Interstate 610. But there's also an Interstate 610 if you go to New Orleans, and that threw me for a loop one time because I was in New Orleans and I'm like, wait a minute, I see a 610 shield. So there's also an Interstate 610 in New Orleans, but that's more of a linear type highway. It's like a bypass in New Orleans for I-10. But it's not a loop. So technically, they're different type of roadways, even though they're both considered Interstate 610. But the one in Houston is a loop that goes around the city. It's a continuous loop versus what's in New Orleans is more of a straight line highway.
Okay, I'm confused, Danny. You just threw me for a loop because I always thought interstates meant that it was a freeway or a highway that went between states. Is that not the case?
No, in this case, it's a loop. It's part of the interstate system.
Oh, okay.
And I've tried to do some research as far as why we got to that point or how we got there, but there's no connection between the 610 in New Orleans and the 610 in Houston. So it's just something that was part of the interstate system, but technically the Interstate 610 in Houston is a loop. So it's Loop 610.
Gotcha. How did 610 get its name, by the way?
The loop actually just goes around the city. The 610 part, I could not tell you. I tried to do some research to find out where they came up with the designation 610. I do know the original intent was to move troops and was more of a corridor that in preparation of World War II to move troops, move equipment, those kinds of things. So that's where the interstate system was very crucial to the efforts of the United States military. But of course, later on, it became a major corridor for travel. And of course, now it's not just for commuter traffic, but also there's a lot of goods and services that move along 610, including some of the hazardous materials that you normally would see that are used at some of the industrial plants that dot the area.
Yeah, it's such an important artery and freeway for our city, right? And it's also a road that has produced so many memories for all of our listeners, for us, for the CityCast Houston team. So let's jump into that. Like, what are some of your favorite memories of 610?
I would say I have two memories. One that's a favorite, of course, and one that's not so favorite. Since I was a kid, going on 610, especially the East Loop, going over the Sidney Sherman Bridge, that's the big bridge that goes over near the Port of Houston. And so seeing that, you can see the entire city basically from that high. And when you're over that bridge, it's the bridge that goes near the Port of Houston area. So you can see downtown, you could see to the east, you could actually see the San Jacinto Monument. So there's different things that you can see. That's always been a favorite of mine. Even to this day, I'm still like a child, the inner child in me enjoys seeing that. When I'm over there, of course, I try to make sure I'm focused. I'm driving. I don't want to not drive focused, but of course, you get to see downtown. My kids have gotten older, and they still point out, but I used to always tell them, look, downtown's over there. You can see downtown. You can see the medical center. You can see everything from up there.
Danny, that is such a cool memory. It's funny you mentioned that because our executive producer, Laura Isensee, has a similar memory about the level changes of 610. Here she is.
So some of my favorite memories of Loop 610 are from when I was a kid, because growing up in Houston, it's such a flat city, flat as a pancake. So I always thought it was really fun to go on Loop 610. I grew up outside the Loop, so we had to go on the Loop to get to downtown or the Galleria. And so I would count going up and down and up and down on the freeway. It was, for me, like going on hills and mountains, and I thought it was really cool. And then I would also get really excited when we went on the South Loop, because I quickly learned that was the way to Galveston and the beach, which continues to be one of my favorite places. Of course, flash forward, and I'm a mom now, and my two kids actually really hate going on the Loop or any freeway in Houston for that matter, because they hate traffic and they don't want to get stuck. And they always ask me for an alternative route. And usually I have to say, no, this is still the fastest way to cross the city. One other favorite memory I have of Loop 610 is actually going all the way around the Loop, going on the east side of the Loop, and you get to go on the Sidney Sherman Bridge, and you get this incredible view of the Houston Ship Channel and all these ships and barges and cargo ships, and you really get to see this ship channel and port that powers so much of our city, and it's right next door. Like, it's literally next to neighborhoods and the Loop, and it's just a reminder of the industry that we have and this really interesting layout we have in Houston. So those are some of my memories and thoughts on Loop 610.
Laura, thank you so much for sharing that memory. Danny, what about that other memory you mentioned, the one that's not so good? What's that one?
So prior to the pandemic, literally a few months before the pandemic began, there was a water main break that occurred just north of the area I'm talking about with the Port of Houston, where the water main broke and it flooded 610. This wasn't a rain event. This wasn't one of our many horrible rain events that we've had, such as Harvey or the Tax Day or Memorial Day floods. This was a water main break, and it flooded 610. And the crazy thing was it looked like a lake. And I've never seen anything like that in my life. So it was bad time. It disrupted traffic for hours. And eventually the water was able to drain off. But it was definitely something that you do not see every day. So seeing 610 full of water, just completely underwater, that was a memory that I wouldn't say was a favorite, but it definitely stands out. And of course, we worked with our partners, the Houston Fire Department, the different agencies, and we were able to get that cleared up. But it was definitely impactful for the city of Houston.
And you can truly see something on 610 that will change your life forever. For example, that right there. I remember that now that you mention it. I had to go look at the video and I was like, wow, yeah, I remember this and how big of a story that was. So it's definitely not a good memory, but a memory nonetheless. Okay, one of my favorite memories, Danny, and this is one that listeners echoed throughout the week when I asked them for their best memories of Loop 610. And Charles Adams, big angry, you see him on TV all the time on Fox. His was Astroworld, right? Going over that bridge that connected the two sides, the parking lot to Astroworld, and it's right over 610. And you just look at how many cars are going back and forth. It is so wild. But everyone had that memory of Astroworld and how much joy it would bring to them. And that was mine as well. When I was a child here in the city of Houston growing up, we're first generation immigrants. So we spent a lot of our time at Astroworld. And that's where we learned about the culture, about the city, because you're standing in line at Astroworld with people from all over the city. So just thinking about that and that joy of almost getting to Astroworld when you take that curve from Meyerland to Kirby, you just see it. You're like, here it is, Astroworld.
Right.
That is such a fond memory for me and so many other listeners.
Yeah, one I would like to share. You're exactly right. I still get giddy when I see the Astrodome. One I'll never forget, and I guess I did have a second favorite, was during the Super Bowl. I was working TxDOT employees, TxDOT staff, our maintenance folks, our emergency operations center was active during the Super Bowl. And literally, I got off of work, I worked my shift, and I'm driving by NRG and just watching the Super Bowl on TV and literally driving maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes after my shift had ended. I'm driving down 610 and looking at like, man, the Super Bowl's going on in there right now. That's like, it was the craziest thought.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going home. I just want to go relax and watch the rest of the Super Bowl. But I pass by, I take 610 to get to my house. And when I was passing by NRG, just looked over at the NRG Stadium and saying, hey, you know what, man, the Super Bowl's going on in that place. That's really just, it was a very surreal thought.
It's so crazy to think about that, right? Like the Super Bowl is happening and we're just driving on this road. It is so nuts.
This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
The other thing I was thinking about 610, I use it to go to Memorial Park and you go through, of course, the Memorial area, right? And then you go down a little bit further and you take the airline exit, and that's where you go for the airline farmers market. And you just take advantage of so many great things the city has to offer. And that's what 610 is, right? Like it means so much to the city in that it connects people to different types of neighborhoods that they maybe wouldn't always go to, right? You've got major neighborhoods like the Heights as well. It's so diverse and it's such an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. When folks are traveling, I mean, of course, the most congested or one of the most congested roadways in the state of Texas, not just Houston, but the state of Texas, is 610, the West Loop.
Yes.
So that's very congested when you drive through there. You can still get through relatively quickly. There's some sections like the northwest part of 610 near 290, for example, that tends to have more congestion than other parts of 610. But you can still travel the city, and of course not during rush hour. Rush hour is always a challenge for folks, the AM rush or the PM rush. But there's so much going on in the city. 610 is a vital route for folks to try to get from point A to point B.
It's funny you bring up that congestion. Brooke Lewis, who is our editor for Hey Houston, has a frustration and a memory that she wants to share about that stretch of 610.
So growing up, my parents always took the feeder roads to get around Houston. They hated getting on the highway and they avoided it at all costs. So I grew up on Westheimer a lot, on Richmond a lot, and not on 610. But when I finally moved out and got my own place, I was excited to be driving on the freeway because my parents just hated it. And I actually felt like driving on 610 was kind of a rite of passage. Like, look at me, I'm an adult. I'm driving past the Galleria. It looks so cool. But I quickly came to find out how bad traffic is on 610. And now that I use it really often to go from where I live inside the loop to visit my parents out in Katy. It is like just one of my daily headaches. I think everyone can understand that feeling of getting onto 610 and their soul just being drained as the traffic comes to a standstill. Because it's just like, no matter the time of day, there's traffic on 610, especially that stretch around the Galleria area. And that's the stretch I use all the time to go to I-10 West. That stretch, oh my goodness, always. My blood pressure's going up, I'm getting frustrated, and my car's not moving.
Why is that stretch always congested, Danny? What is the deal with that?
So 610, the West Loop, as I mentioned, is the stretch between US 59, I-69, all the way to 290, for example, considered the West Loop. That is one of the most congested roadways in the state of Texas. So that's why we were doing the 610, 69 project, because we had widened 610 over the years. We had widened I-69, US 59 over the years, but the connectivity was the issue. So with the 610, 69 project we're currently working on, it was a way to improve mobility and enhance safety through there, because we were having these crashes where folks were weaving at the last minute, getting over, trying to get off of 610 to go to 69. And we're seeing situations with crashes. So we improved the traffic flow, but also we widened many of the ramps that were 1 lane to 2 lanes. Now, folks still have concerns. We still get feedback from folks why we didn't widen the 69 southbound connector to 610 northbound. That's the connector if you're coming from downtown going to the Galleria, for example. That remained 1 lane, but we did improve the efficiency of it. Unfortunately, because of the lane assignments, we didn't widen that part of 610. So we had to keep that ramp 1 lane. It's a heavily used loop that connects to other freeways. So we're trying to improve that connectivity so it won't back up traffic on the main lanes of 610.
Yeah, let's talk about that interchange project, because I have some good words for you, okay? I drove it last week on Friday, and for the first time in a long time, I had no traffic heading up 59 North, going to 610 North. I had no traffic, and that was wild, right? There's 2 lanes that are connecting. But I know, as you mentioned, there are some connector ramps in that interchange that are 1 lane, and people are still frustrated with that, especially after all the construction, after all the work, after all the shutdowns. And they're still like, wait, why is there only 1 lane? What happened, Danny?
So in that one instance where the 69 southbound connector to 610 northbound, we kept that 1 lane because of the amount of lanes on 610 itself. So we have 2 lanes coming from 69 going northbound, and we have the 1 lane coming from 69 going southbound. So there's only a certain amount of lanes that you can have for that connectivity. So we can address it in a future project where we widen 610, for example. But that was the only ramp we kept mostly at 1 lane. The other ramps that were 1 lane, we increased that to 2 lanes. So it did improve the traffic flow, but also we made the ramps longer, set them further back. That's the current design standards, where we're putting those connector ramps, those connections a lot further back. So you prevent the weaving, because folks, what they're doing at the last minute, like, whoa, I need to get over. I want to go to 69. And they get over at the last minute. And that's when you have the serious crashes, especially if you're coming from like the Bel Air, Meyerland area going on 610.
And we always hear from other listeners and readers when other major freeways are being worked on or expanded, that neighborhoods get impacted. How do y'all pick? And, do you understand their frustration about why is this neighborhood, which might seem a little bit more higher end, they can fight this while other neighborhoods might not be able to?
Well, we always look at building within the existing right-of-way. That's always something we look at initially when we start working on projects. So we try to build with the existing right-of-way. And sometimes when we do a widening, or there's some kind of project that we have that we're moving forward on that requires expansion, where we need additional right-of-way, then we look at where we can take land that's going to minimize impacts on the public. So there's always remedies and options. But of course, as we build, or as we move into the future, Houston continues to grow. So that's the issue that we run into sometimes. So we always try to minimize the impacts to folks. There's not a preference. Okay, we're going to impact this neighborhood versus this neighborhood. So that's why we have the public involvement process. That's why we have public meetings, so folks can come in. It's not just residential folks. It's also business owners. We have business owners that come in and bring things to our attention saying, hey, you're proposing to take a piece of my land, but it's really going to impact me. Is there anything you can do to mitigate this and to minimize the impact. So that's why we look at all options. This is not a process we say, you know what, we're going to pick that area. We're going to take this. We're going to use this to get right of way for projects. No, we involve the public. So we have multiple public meetings. We have a public hearing. We get that feedback, and then we move on with that feedback, and we look at different options. We do that with a lot of our frontage road projects, for example, or FM road projects, where we can always widen to the north, widen to the south, or we can just widen all to the south, for example. So we look at where we can minimize the impacts. Are we taking out businesses? Are we going to take out or impact residences rather than maybe just some parking spaces? That's what we look at.
Let's talk about the future of this important freeway. What is the future of 610 here in the city?
So 610 at the 69 interchange, that project, we're wrapping that up later this year. We are mostly done, but what folks may not see, in addition to the connectivity improvements that we've made, the redoing of the entire interchange, we've also added pumps. We've also added an additional frontage road capacity. So there's been many significant changes. If folks remember back when we had major flood situations in the past, that 610 southbound frontage road would flood all the time. There's an underpass there, and we actually had several fatalities there. The roadway would flood, folks would drive through it, and then we had a bad situation. So we've added pumps and other flood mitigation remedies. We have ponds, things that could take on more water. So you're not going to see the major flooding that you would have seen in the past. So those are the improvements that we made with this project. It's a $259 million project. We started in 2018 and we're wrapping up in 2024. So we're very excited about that. Now, the 610 Cambridge project, which is a different project that's near 288. So we've done some improvements on 610 going eastbound and westbound. We've widened, we've improved the traffic flow, but we're also improving the connectivity, some of the connections to 288. Now, 288, we had a toll project that was completed a number of years ago, and we did improve the connectivity there. Unfortunately, with this project, it was a different type of project that came later. So we had to take out a portion of the connection that was going to 288, only a portion of some of the ramps, and we're improving that connectivity. So you're going to see a better flow of traffic there on 610 and 288. We're trying to improve the connectivity because we did that a number of years ago with 610 at 290. So we completed that work, I would say about 5-6 years ago. So when we completed that work, it improved traffic flow through there. Traffic used to back up significantly, especially folks that were gravitating towards 290. So we're just continuing that progress. So we had the 290 610 project a number of years ago. We're completing the 610 69 project, the interchange project that will be completed at the end of the year. Then the 610 Cambridge project, which is more serving the South Loop, that will finish mostly substantially by the end of the year, but definitely by the beginning of 2025, we should be wrapped up and have all that opened up and good to go.
Danny, progress is key. Let's raise our coffee, our water. If you're drinking at this point, then hey, you do what you got to do. Let's toast Loop 610 on this day. Celebrate it, love it or hate it. It's a big part of our life. Cheers to Loop 610.
Thanks, Raheel. Appreciate it.
That was Danny Perez, Public Information Officer at TxDOT, with appearances from CityCast Houston executive producer Laura Eisensee and Hey Houston newsletter writer Brooke Lewis. And by the way, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter, Hey Houston, with the info in our show notes for even more Houston content. That will do it for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. I woke up and I felt like I got hit by a truck. I worked out too hard yesterday.